We're all back together again. Took a little hiatus there. So this is the collaboration meeting, February 11th, with Decarcerate Minnesota and the Minnesota Department of Corrections. Do you know if Deputy Commissioner Shanklin is coming on later?
I'm not sure. There may be others joining here as we go.
Do you think we should start yet?
Yeah, we can go ahead and start.
Okay. All right. All right, Angela, do you want to take it away? This is the second slide here. Angela is going to be our main facilitator today.
So we're saying Happy New Year to everyone.
New Year!
Happy New Year.
So we stopped DOC inmates being housed together in jails. Some of our accomplishments: reduced the number of people sent to prison on parole violations by 50%. Multiple other issues we're still working on, which are ongoing human rights advocacy. We can do more, which is what today's agenda is focusing on, beginning with earned time credit, person-centered approach, religions rights of Muslims, technical violations, our current numbers, future changes, work release, DOC upcoming budget requests, COVID-19 vaccines, an update on victim visitation policy, retirement in prison, inmate representation, and then we'll do a closing. And that's our agenda for this evening. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over right now to Mr. Cooley.
Thanks, Angela. Can everyone hear me?
I can hear you.
All right. Thanks a lot. So we got a full agenda, Commissioner Schnell, and I know that you're kind of rolling out this person-centered approach, some reforms. We've kind of been hearing about them through some of our partners. Things are trickling out. And so I don't know if today is the right time to really dig into this, maybe have a next meeting where we just really focus on what's going on here. But, we would like to be included and have some feedback on this vision. Do you know a timeline and a timeline basically on when this is going to be rolled out?
So I'm prepared to talk about it tonight with a fairly high level of detail on this. I also, the revisor's office there's a massive backlog in the revisor's office, and that's because of all the special sessions that were going on. And so we have just got a revisor's draft. We ended up making a bunch of tweaks on that already, so we've sent those back. We're hoping to get that back maybe even this weekend, hopefully, but if not, early next week. And then we can send that out because we'll be filing filing that bill fairly quickly after we get it back. And I can talk a little bit more in detail about what we think this is going to look like. So you want me to do that now, or you want me to wait?
I don't know. We got a pretty full agenda, and I'm wondering should we do it late? I mean, I guess I could take the pulse of the room. Do we want to hear about this now, or should we schedule our next meeting around like a really in-depth approach when all the details have been ironed out? I mean, maybe you just want to give us an overview of the basic points, and then anything that's coming to mind right now.
Yeah. So just quickly, the way it works is that the bill would require the Department of Corrections to establish a robust orientation and intake process that uses this kind of what we're calling person-centered approach. Ultimately, it engages in that intake and assessment process, which includes everything from the standard things: substance use, medical, dental, mental health, educational, vocational, We also want to do some strength-based stuff, support systems, community supports that are available to them. And so it's this full, kind of the full spectrum thing. We would then have a multidisciplinary team, using this model out of Mayo Clinic, would meet with them. They would develop in concert with that person's voice being a significant part of that. I mean, key to developing that plan, that program plan. The role of case management then is to help the folks navigate the services. We are doing an entire review of all programming options that we offer, and we've done some assessments of gaps in services that we offer, and we'll be looking to develop those. We are also increasing the amount of outside program involvement where we can accomplish that. The key thing here is that we want to make sure that oftentimes the answer is let's have everybody come into the facilities. We in some of our facilities we had 200 different volunteer programs that access the facilities at different times. And what happens then is we ultimately end up, in some cases, canceling one program because we couldn't accommodate the others. And so the long haul deal here is that we want to make sure that what we can do is no matter what programs we're offering, we can staff them so that people can get what they need. We're also really looking at a community model, which expands programming hours 6 to 7 days per week. So we're running programs on the weekends, which might allow people to work, do treatment 2 nights a week, and take a college class a night or 2 a week, or do a weekend college class. So we're really looking at how we change the schedule to be really create program-rich environments. What that results in is that that program plan that was developed, as people follow that program plan, they would be eligible then for release at 50%. So I use this example frequently. Today, if Will, you and I had a 100-month sentence, we would both have, and we started the same day, we would have to serve 67 months in, 33 months on supervised release. What would happen in this model is you go in and you do all the stuff that you need to do. I go in and I develop a plan, but I don't follow it. I get myself in trouble. I fight to do whatever it may be. And what's going to end up happening is you're going to walk at 50 months. I'm going to stay as long as I need to until I kind of get my stuff together. And then at 67, I'm guaranteed the out. So you still have the benefits of a determinate system, but you have mechanisms that allow people to earn this early release incentive. They would then start supervision, and we're calling that earned incentive release, or earned incentive release is what that would look like. They then go to supervision, and because you're going to follow your plan and you're doing exactly what your program plan was, and that correlates with your supervision plan, for every 2 months of compliance with your plan and success with your plan, 1 month is going to be removed from the end. So instead of 33 months on supervised release, you now have 22 months. And then what happens is that 11 months goes into what we're calling supervision abatement status. It's unsupervised period of supervision. Now, and the only way that really is going to, that could trigger a problem is if you reoffend, right? Because we're not interested in technical violations, we're interested in reoffense. And why does that matter? Because you would have a custody point if you reoffended during the period of the abatement status. And then the third component, so we have earned incentive release, we have supervision abatement status, and the third component of the model that we've written up and put together is justice reinvestment. And what we've done is the number of days that are saved by you doing what you do it resulted in a savings of $19,800. We took that $19,800 and we put that into a special revenue fund. And we think that when we maximize the effectiveness of this model and really build everything around it, that we could save at a minimum of probably around $10 million a year, $20 million annually. That money then gets reinvested. 25% goes into making sure that there is high levels of victim support, because oftentimes we know that early release can trigger concerns, because while we're doing the right thing by people who are incarcerated, victims also need to feel that sense of support and that opportunity to be lifted up. So 25% goes over to OJP for community-based victim services. 25% goes into the supervision model, and really what we're trying to devote time to here is additional resources for them to be able to provide supports to people who need more supports during the course of supervision. 25% gets invested in gap services, those services that may be beneficial to keeping people out if there was a community-based alternative. And in particular, we want to use those funds to address things like inequities that can exist in different parts of the state. And then the last 25% gets returned to the general fund. And the model here is really based on a desire to say, look, we want to be in a position where the folks who, the decision makers, there's something in this for everyone. People who are more oriented toward the social justice side of criminal justice reform, there's something for them. And people who are more interested in the sustainability and the economics of criminal justice reform, there's something in there for them as well. We have been having conversations with legislators. It's been very positive to date. There are some issues, and I'm just going to point these out right away. And I've talked to several of our partners about this, and the law schools and others, as we've been talking about this. There's a number of exclusions, and some of these exclusions we don't control. Now, the legislature can change this, but these exclusions are really based on certain offenses where people cannot access programs that result in early release. The other thing that's really challenged by this is those folks that have sentences that have conditional release supervision terms. And so we need to, right now, there's exclusions around those. What we're saying to people folks that are in advocacy, these are the things that ultimately we need as soon as that bill drops, and we'll I'm hoping in the next week or week and a half, that bill will drop, and we'll get that out to people as soon as we have the final version of the reviser's draft. But that people start to make recommendations to legislators for amendments to language if you want something changed, because that's the way we develop really good policy. What I don't want to do is come in with a bill that is going to be denied out of hand and we're never going to get a hearing anywhere. I want to come in with a bill that means something to people. And then as we start to talk about those exclusions, I'm a supporter of opening it up to a lot more people in a lot more circumstances. But maybe somebody can mute if you're, but I think if as you look at this, we really need you all to think about language or think about different provisions that would make it better or easier. So that's the model.
Yeah, and thank you very much for working on this. And as you're probably aware, I mean, this is some of the stuff we've been working on for a long time, the abatement and some of these things were in our technical violations bill. So I think there's a lot of positive overlap here, and we're enthusiastic about changes. I think a couple significant things came up in our last group meeting, though, in terms of this. And one was, that model that you talked about, where we both come in and we're both given these tasks, and we're headed towards this 50%. It seems like there would have to be pretty solid safeguards in there to make sure that there's a sense of legitimacy for both people, right? So yeah, I'm working my way towards this 50%, but then something happens and I do get in a fight, which happens all the time in a very artificial environment that is prison. And then I lose my chance at that 50%. I would think that's going to really undermine the legitimacy of the system if people feel like they're being treated unfairly and then have to get bumped back to the 67% or something like that, right?
Well, I think it's not an all or nothing. And I think that's what we have to do. There are things we can problem solve, and there are things that do have, that could have some consequences. And and we've had conversations about this with incarcerated folks. We've been having some talk with the people that are in. We've also had conversations, reviewed some of the model of this, and talked about the very issues with people that are recently out. And they believe that there's going to be that the supports around this, that kind of the implications for cultural change, both among, in particular around trying to address some of the things that can jam people up. And we know that this is going to require a problem-solving approach. And so this is going to be a work in progress. We are going to do robust measurement to make sure that we don't end up with racial disparities or gender disparities, and those sorts of things. So you're right. We want to be able to address this, but I don't think it's an all or nothing. If you don't get out at 50%, maybe you get out at 59 months versus 67. I mean, we have to come up with ways to address this, and these are some of the places where, and we're talking to other states who are doing some of this. And in every state, these have been some of the issues. We don't want it to be all or nothing, because that's not in the best interest of anyone, the system, the security and the safety of the prison, nor the people who are incarcerated. So we want to make sure that we're addressing this overall.
Yeah, I think the devil will really be in those details, and discretion will be a part of it, of course. But as we talked about with some of the technical violations and things like that, too much discretion can lead to abuse of that power too. So
measurement is a key factor. I think if what we measure matters, what we can show, and the more transparent we can be, it makes it much more difficult for people to play around those edges. And I agree with you. But there is, I don't know that there is a perfect system. We're going to have to really work to develop it.
Yeah, and I guess that is the second concern that came up in our last meeting about this. Just sounds too damn good. And when prosecutors and judges hear about this, they're going to say, oh, now I feel even better about sending people to the DOC and not handling people on a community level, because they're getting all this treatment. The Mayo Clinic is involved. It's going to be this person-centered approach where they're incentivized to do good and come out better people. What kind of safeguards do you have in there to make sure that prosecutors and judges especially, and we know this happens all the time,
right,
where they actually are congratulating themselves for sending people to prison because somehow they're going to come out better people, when we know that there's just not great evidence for that. Even in a system like this, prison is still prison, and more people should be handled on a local basis. I mean, you were in that hearing with me when they talked about keeping those work camps open up north.
Mm-hmm.
That was some serious paternalism that I heard, like talking about how great it is and Matthew is in the room right now. He was part of CIP. They just went on and on about this is the greatest thing ever happened to these people, to have them do unfree labor up north, right? Not bad people. I'm not saying those were bad people at all, but just dripping with paternalism. And we're just really concerned that if you make it sound too good, and you have a magnetism about you even, that prosecutors and judges will up the number of people sent to prison.
So we've talked about this too, and and one of the things that I'm asking the Sentencing Guidelines Commission to really do is we want to make sure that we're looking at these numbers. We think we can see. We will be able to see. We're not going to see it immediately, but we're going to be able to see if there are shifts in either changes in length of sentence or changes in commitments. What would have been, we know what departure rates are in the state, and we can see if we see a reduction in the number of departures, we think we can identify that and begin to call that out. So I hear what you're saying, and I would just also say this, that I believe that one of the reasons we started here is because it is more within our control. ultimately, this model needs, if we can achieve some success here, this same model needs to be extended to community supervision, so probation, right? Where, again, let's do robust assessment. What do people need? Well, how do we help lift people up, support them, and their support network, and ultimately incentivize early release in a far more systemic way, because that's what's not happening in many cases. So I agree with you. We're going to have to do measurement, and that's the mechanism we're going to have to watch. We have presented just very briefly the conceptual, very similar to what I just did with you, to the County Attorneys Association. We're going to be presenting it in detail to them on the 19th of February. And I don't know if they're going to, I don't anticipate that they're going to support it, but I'm hoping that they don't oppose it.
Okay. Yeah. So I think in order to move the meeting along, maybe for our next meeting, and then we'll have, a firmer grasp of everything that's in that bill, and we'll have a chance to, everybody can really look at it and talk to our part. We've already been talking to Violence Free Minnesota about it, and other groups. So I think we'll hold off on the questions for now. And Angela, if I could turn it back to you, and we can get back to some more in-depth questions next time. Commissioner Schnell, does that sound okay?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, moving forward. Bethany? Okay. So we're going to go into some religious rights of the Muslims. We've received a few concerning reports. The Muslims in Rush City are reporting that they are not being allowed to wear kufiya on their head, which has been allowed for many years.
Angela,
yes.
Can I interrupt you? I'm sorry. Forgive me for the misunderstanding. We're gonna primarily let KB present on this.
Okay.
KB, are you?
No, she can continue. I can jump in.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. Go ahead, Angela.
She started out good.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
I'm sorry, you were just finishing the first bullet point.
Okay. Commissioner, are you aware of this change, or could you let us know why it is happening and if it should be?
It shouldn't be. If there was, to my knowledge, there was no change in any policy. So this is news to me. And then, we'll check, and if it, I don't know what it would be, but we'll address it.
I think that it could have a little bit to do with some Islamophobia with some of the guards. So that might be something to look into.
The other issue the other issue is the fact that they're being told that they can make prayer at work, but they can't leave their workstations and they can't prostrate.
Okay.
And so far, I'm only being told that this is being done in Rush City.
Okay. All right. I'll have to do some check. I will have to look into it. I know that the whole kind of the religion policy is under review, but I'll look at that and figure out what the deal is.
And Commissioner, this is Michelle. I'm on, and so I'll take care of it tomorrow. Look into it.
And I mean, I would love to help you shape those policies. I've talked to Wafiq. I have not spoken with CARE, but I think Bethany has. And we would love to be part of helping you guys shape those policies, especially when it comes to the Muslims.
Yeah, it's a comprehensive policy change, but yeah, we can, for all religions and that kind of stuff, but we can definitely come back and if there are specific, we should look at the specific practices by tradition.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Michelle.
Are we done with this slide, everyone?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Next up, go ahead, Angela.
Okay. Technical violations. Will?
Yep, me again. I'm back. So any updates on data? First of all.
Yeah. I just printed this. Hang on 1 second here. I'm gonna pull it up. But so yeah, I printed it, but I know I forgot where I put it. So I'm just gonna I'm gonna pull it up on my phone, but I did get some data here.
That's okay. Take your time. You can take a minute.
So we you know, the numbers are continuing to go down. Although, you know, we have, I should say, I should put that differently. We have seen over the course of time here, we saw a massive drop or dip over the summer in monthly admissions. And then as we start out, we are seeing, you know, we see some of this stuff upticking a little bit, and that's obviously a concern. So during the month of January, we have there were 243 new admissions to the DOC. 127 of those were probation violators. 177 were release violators, and that was in 2020. In 2021, there was 120 new commits, so about a half, about half as many commits, which we would expect under COVID. 66 probation violator returns and 95 release violator returns. So the month over month, the year-to-year comparison, 547 in January of 2020, 281 in the month of January of 2021. And I can look back and we're seeing that we saw, you know, when our lowest months were in the months of April, May, and June of 2020. You know, we had release returns 44, 52, and 66 respectively. And that's, you know, and you can go back and look at in 2019, release violator admissions were running between right around between 220 and 240 admissions per month. And so, you know, right now we're running roughly, I would say, about half or a little bit lower, you know, in terms of the overall number of reductions of release violators. We have been there, the focus has been more heavily on looking at those cases that have been recharged with new crimes. There are some conditions that we are having some conversations about really pushing on, you know, some of these release violator returns again. And you should just know that we're having some really significant conversations with the probation delivery system. And so as part of that, these kind of issues are coming up, you know, release violators, what constitutes base level supervision services, all that kind of stuff. I would also tell you this, that Grant Dewey, our researcher at the DOC, they just published, and if it's not on the website yet, it will be soon. They published an evaluation of ISR. And you know, I'm meeting with Grant here to talk through about what that looks like. But there's some good things there, and there's some things that are concerning. And some of this is none of this is going to be a surprise to you. There's an indication that ISR does serve a benefit or purpose with some people, certain types of folks early on, but it diminishes in terms of its effectiveness over time. Number one. Number two, when we look at the numbers, it indicates that you know, the downside is that the high levels of revocations. And so we're really talking about this whole notion of what constitutes a sound return on investment. And so this really is, you know, going to become a big focus. I'm meeting with Grant, and we're going to be looking at what are based on the evaluation findings, what are the practical protocols and policies changes that we might want to implement to ensure that those numbers are driven down.
I kind of have a question, Commissioner.
Yeah.
When you're speaking on ISR and its benefits and it having an effect and so forth, when you have someone on ISR and you know, that person has not actually reoffended, do you consider that actually a positive? Even if that person does commit a technical violation, if that person does not reoffend or commits a new crime, isn't that kind of like a 50-50?
I don't know. I guess it would depend on the fact set and the circumstances. If you're talking about it from a harm reduction standpoint, yeah, probably is.
Okay.
Thanks. Yeah, and we've had some. Jay Lindgren is in the room here. We had a very positive meeting with Becky and Al not long ago, and they talked a lot about the things you're talking about, and they did. Al mentioned that he was already going to dive into ISR a little bit and bring in some partners too. We weren't one of those partners that were on the list, but hopefully we will be. I do think that we're meeting with Ron Solheid next week too, and the way that these special conditions had mushroomed in the 2010s, and this is one of the hangups that we're having even when we meet with like Violence Free Minnesota, and I can tell it's going to be a problem for the person-centered approach and for reforming technical violations to try to get a handle on what special conditions make sense and what when they don't make sense, and how did they get so out of control in the 2010s where people had 40 special conditions on them during their supervised release. And I think Minnesota was the nation's leader in most special conditions. How do we dial that back smartly to make sure that people have a chance to make it once they get released?
Well, I think there has been significant changes on the special conditions, being massive changes. And I'm just going to tell you that this is good. This whole area is a priority for me, and it's going to get addressed.
And I think that's a positive sign. But when we talk to the DOC and the people, and they say, "Well, don't bring the legislator in on these things because sometimes it only gets worse when we bring the legislator in." But then we see something like this that happened. That must have happened on the DOC's watch. And I don't think there was a whole lot of outside pressure from people saying you guys should put more special conditions, right?
Probably not. I mean, oftentimes, just like everything else, bad situations result in bad policy, right? You have a horrible thing happen, and new policies get established, and it results in bad policy.
Yeah. So I guess this is more of like a philosophical question on how we really make sure that once you reduce them, and then the next person comes in and a bad thing happens, which it will, that those won't just spike right back up and we'll be back to people having 40 different special conditions once they're on release. How do we really make, I think focused deterrence is a good thing too. And there are certain special conditions that make sense, right? But it doesn't make sense to have 40 special conditions on a person.
And I'm 100% with you. But I think we also did, they also, as I understood it, they created some standardized conditions, and then in some situations there are some targeted conditions depending upon some certain risk factors or whatever, or certain victim considerations in some cases or whatever. But I think that list has gone down a lot. I see Roger's point's a good one. As I've said in this group before, the best thing that you can do is you want to create guardrails as you legislate it, right? Because that's the thing that's hardest to unravel. Anything that's driven by policy can be changed. Anything that rules are if we can do rulemaking around some of these things, it is requires a level of public input. It requires there's a level of transparency. It's not the same as statute, but it's still pretty good. So, I mean, there are ways to ultimately codify things to make it harder to unravel and harder to impose additional sanctions. So I think those are things that certainly can be looked at. Right now, as I think the political kind of landscape is such that you might get it in one body and you're not going to get it in the other, and it's going to die. And so I think how and when that happens, and because again I could be gone tomorrow, but I know that the most I have is till the end of the governor's term, and depending upon what happens with the election and so forth. So I don't know what happens after that.
So just one more quick question. This came from the inside, and I think it does go back to the person-centered approach too, because I think the sex offender program has kind of been person-centered. And it's also left a whole lot of people in this no man's land. And so we have people calling in to us and talking about these treatment mandates that get tossed on them after they get revoked on a technical violation. And they wasn't even part of their original sentence. And now they can't even fulfill those treatment mandates because of COVID, because the person is out. And these are situations that should be happening in the community, and we could do it, look at Zoom and stuff like this, all the things that people are doing. So I guess we'd like you to look into that a little bit more on some of these people that are getting treatment mandates after they get revoked on a technical violation and end up in this no man's land because it's really hard to fulfill these treatment mandates, especially in a time of COVID.
And I can't say I've done like a massive. Just to pull a bunch of these cases, just to review them just myself, to see what the situation was. And in many cases, the treatment mandates were put on after they were released with some level of a treatment mandate in a community based, and they didn't, and they repeatedly failed to either engage or do whatever. So I hear you. We can certainly take a look at it. I think this is one of the, if there's a gap service out there, this is one of them. Sex offender treatment service, community-based sex offender treatment service is a gap service, period. It needs to, we need more resources on that front.
Domestic violence community treatment too.
Yeah, we're actually doing some research right now, working with the Office of Violence Against Women in DC, some technical assistance stuff to just try and identify evidence-based better intervention programs and those sorts of things, relationship health programs and so forth. So, and we worked with Violence Free Minnesota during COVID to try and increase the number of those to be delivered electronically.
Yeah. And so I'll just make this last point there about when we talk to prosecutors. Lisa and I, for instance, were on a meeting with a Carver County prosecutor, and he's a pretty good guy, an open-minded guy, Republican, but he's very open-minded. And he talks about the lack of resources in his community, and he's got to scrounge for these grants for domestic violence and drug court and things like that, right? Maybe I'm just throwing this at you that before we go too far with, we're going to do these things in prison, we got to put the onus back on the communities that, well, yeah, you got to do these things in your community first. And Kate Erickson has talked about this too, right? Like sometimes it becomes an excuse for the community, like, well, we don't have these things, so let's just send them to prison. And they're making your job harder. I mean, the people in this room, believe it or not, are actually kind of making your job easier, trying to make your job easier. And prosecutors and judges are making your job harder by just throwing their hands in the air and saying, well, we don't have any local domestic violence treatment. Let's toss them to Paul Schnell and he'll take care of this. I think there's a real danger in that.
I'm 100% in agreement. I think this is the challenge of, why focus on some of the things we're focused on, because we have more control over it. And our biggest struggle is going to be, how do we make sure that we move on the front end, upstream. I agree with you.
Thanks, Angela.
Okay, work release. So just want to start by quoting a policy here. 244-065, private employment of inmates of state correctional institutions in community. When consent with the public interest and the public safety, the Commissioner of Corrections may conditionally release an inmate to work at paid employment, seek employment, or participate in a vocational training or educational program as provided in section 241-26 if the inmate has served at least 1/2 of the term of imprisonment. That is the policy. So,
That's the law.
well, the statute.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's way more leeway to release than currently being used. In what ways has work release not been a successful long-term program?
I wouldn't say it hasn't been a successful program. I would say we see diminishing returns the longer people are out on work release. When you start to have people in work release for longer than a year, violations of work release have increased dramatically over time. And that included when they were doing things like phase 1 and phase 2 work release, where they would move someone from a halfway house or from a jail placement out of state Minnesota into electronic monitoring in the community. The people that went longer than 8 months to that year, they saw increases in failures.
So, I mean, are there ways that we can kind of work and bridge this policy, this statute into helping things to become more of a way to create or decarcerate, basically, is what I'm trying to say.
To be frank, from my view, focusing more on the earned incentive release model is actually a better model than work release. Because here's if I had my way, right now, if we look at earned incentive release, it doesn't have some of the strings that we can have with this, because there are some restrictions in terms of offense type. If you look at 241-26, and then what I want to do is be able to use work release. Work release is a costly program where I think it's very effective, but it's costly. We're paying for that transition time. Usually it's a step down through a halfway house or some release center work release program in a county someplace. And so what ends up happening is there's a cost to that because what's happening is really a step down process. In my view, we should be moving for people who are kind of doing the drill and are able to work their plan inside. They get the 50% release on earned incentive release. And that's actually to their benefit, because right now, the way that law is written, it's actually a sentence reduction. If you leave at 50% versus 67, that 17% is in your pocket. You own it. You know. Now, legislatively, we may not be able to get that through, but right now we've reduced the sentence because of that earned incentive. This actually doesn't change that, and it actually increases your length of supervision, because the term, you're going to have 50% of your time is going to be in a supervision status. So in my view, I would like to use work release more regularly with people who may not be eligible or may not be able to participate in earned incentive release, but would benefit from a process of step down and reentry into the community. And I think you can look at some of these longer term people who are incarcerated for longer term periods of time, and to be able to move them out 8 months early and get them into a step down process where normally they wouldn't qualify for that. To me, that's the right use of this resource. And that earned incentive release really should become the ways in which the vast majority of people earn their way out early, decarcerate in your words.
But looking at, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, Raj had said a few things in the chat. I just wanted to make sure though that you saw those, Commissioner Schnell. Or Raj, do you want to say anything?
Sure thing. Commissioner, you said, your vision, in your view, you have certain idealistic programming, right? Why don't we figure out what is your level of discretion to commission and support that view so that we can put it in play, we can, as a community, support you versus waiting for crumbs to drop on us so that we can celebrate. We want to support you if you have these views, right, that you say will work, then let's pilot it, right?
So the only thing I can say is, look, we do work release now. We, at any given time, there's about 250 people on work release in the state. That's what we really, that's what we can afford. Now if we expand, we have to be able to address this question of the number. I worry that it's going to be like ISR, right? That because the data shows that the longer people are in work release, they're going to fail at higher rates. So I don't, there probably are things we can do to address that. I don't know exactly what they are. But those are, we don't want to, we can use that, but ultimately, if it ends up resulting in higher levels of failure, then that's not a very good option for people. And my thing is, how do we get people out and get them disconnected from the system? And I hear what you're saying, that I would argue that this structural change, this legislative change, is more than crumbs. I think it's a big change. I think it actually, when I'm going to talk to people like a Kevin Reese, who did a long time, and he can say, look, I think
14 years.
Yeah. I wish we could get everybody could take advantage of this, but I got to tell you that I think it's going to make a difference. He really believes it can make a difference, and so I really want to drive focus on that. And I don't think it's that far off. I don't think it's that far off. We don't have the resources to put more people on work release immediately. And right now we can't, because of COVID becomes a concern. We've had a number of fairly significant failures on COVID work release. And so, these become some of those bigger challenges. And part of that was because we didn't have high levels of supports for people as they were going out into work release. They were going home, and oftentimes without levels of supports, and then things would happen, and there's a failure. So those have been some kind of major issues that we have not been able to resource adequately, and that's part of the challenge. And how we fix that, I'm certain there are ways to fix it, Raj. I don't know what that is right now.
Do you know, Commissioner, what percentage of those failures are technical violations, and which of them are committing new crimes?
Some of them are, I think some of the biggest ones, there was a number of people who've committed new crimes, but a number of them were things like, and I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but a lot of them were just, they absconded and they're gone. And then, what ends up happening, now you can argue that's a technical violation. But when you're remember, in work release, you're not on supervision status. You are in a custody status, and that makes it different than on supervised release. I think we can work on restructuring people who have absconded or gone ghost for a time, as long as they didn't reoffend. When people are on work release status, it's a supervision. It's not supervision status. It is in custody status. So that makes it a different legal setting, and I think that's one of the challenges that we get. Then we get major pushback from the system to say, look, you're responsible for providing a reasonable level of security, supports, and all those types of things while people are out on work release, because they are still serving their 2/3 time, and that's not happening. And then these people take off or whatever, and frequently they may have been a domestic situation, it may have been a significant relapse, it may have been whatever, and then they out of fear they take off. So that's the difference.
Commissioner, you have a research department, right? The famous or infamous Grant Dewey running the department, right? If you were to ask that department to say, what are the 3 things that is getting people successful? When you do a regression analysis, what are those 3 things? Say, these are the 3 things that made me not recidivate, not commit another crime, or whatever technically violate things. And these are the things that made me violate things, right? While I'm on work release. Can you provide us those things so that we can say, okay, what are the organizations doing? What are family members doing, so that we can focus on those variables that make them successful, right? And what is the percentage? If you were to say, 60% of the people are successful, only 20% or 10%, because sometimes we exaggerate the number of failure versus the success rate. We are very deficit mindset versus growth mindset.
I agree with you. And so I would say that in traditional work release, it's a significantly higher percentage of people successfully complete. Okay. Right now we use it's an 8-month max, mostly about 6. Where the COVID work release was a little different because they went home. Remember, they didn't step down through a halfway house and that kind of stuff. And sometimes there wasn't that level of supports and structure in that move. Now there was some work release kind of analysis done, but it's many years ago. I'm meeting with Grant, I think on Monday, and I'm going to ask him a little bit about some of this. And just to see if when they look at this, what it would take to do some level of evaluation. But it's a good question. I don't know what what it currently would be. I think what we know is that, even both, and again, it's not hard research, but what we hear from people is that oftentimes, especially people who've been incarcerated for longer periods of time, the step down part is important. The kind of controlled reentry and being more planful. Now, there's some things that I really would like to do to better integrate the work release experience, and with there's people support systems and that kind of stuff. But there's work to be done there. But I'll ask Grant about that. I'll to see what he says, and if it's something that if he has a sense of from some of the evaluation stuff he has done, or if it's something that could be done.
Y'all, I'm going to asking so many questions, but I just want to ask one last question, Commissioner. Just wondering, right, if you identify those successful markers, are you willing to take resources from DOC and say, you know what, we are going to channel this money to accentuate and make these variables much more accessible for everybody, right? You say traditional work release was successful or is successful versus COVID, right? We want to focus on that traditional work release success. What are its stories? How do we put more resources around it? And then last question is, what kind of partnership do you have in the community with agencies that are out here saying, oh, you're on traditional work release, or here's what we can do to support you?
So can we move the resources? Would I like to? Yes. Can I? It's not as easy because there's some logistics things about being able to move monies between programs, but there are ways to do it. Let me ask this question. Do you believe that if we were to be successful in terms of being able to move people out at 50% without work release, don't you think that would be a better option? To actually reduce their sentence by 17%?
Why don't we try all of it, Commissioner?
Well, and I want to do the stuff that if we can get the people out that are going to, that maybe it's going to be folks that there's a chunk of folks that we they go and they're just like, man, I want to be done with this. I want to get out. And they're going to they're deeply invested in themselves. And, we're doing a lot more higher ed stuff that's going to be happening. And we really are trying to double down on that side. I think the halfway, the work release is a part of the puzzle. And you're right. I want to try all of it that we can create success. And with the biggest goal to me being able to reduce people's involvement in the system and make sure that we have the ability to have success options like work release, oftentimes because of the levels of supports that people get. They just find that job, and they have some structure as they're re-entering and reconnecting and doing all those things. How do we build that? And so, I'm with you. We want to do them all, but how do these things fit together? And so I'm there.
One last question. Thank you so much mentioning the 2 stages, and if there is any research on what the second stage looked like at some point, we'll love to see it, just to see what they did wrong or what wasn't working. And I just want to circle back to an issue that came up almost exactly a year ago now about minimum program failure, and how lots of people are being violated out of minimum programming and then actually being denied work release. So their estimate was hundreds. I don't know what the exact number would be, but lots of guys and women are not being able to access work release. I think particularly guys in this case, because of these minimum program failures. And I know, Michelle, you were going to look into changing classifications, and it's now been a year. So I'm just curious kind of like where that's at, and are we still going to make this change such that, we're not having people kicked out of minimum on nothing and then not qualifying for work release?
So I think as we look at this whole restructure of the agency and shifting resources to the front end, looking at how if we're going to be program rich, education and treatment, all these different things that people can access, then we're having deep and heavy and hard conversations about classification. And I always joke to Michelle, like, we don't need classification anymore, but I think that there is, we want to minimize a lot of classification stuff so that people can make sure that they access programs. We don't want people to be able to leave or have to leave certain things. I don't want people to have to leave a college class that they're halfway through in order to get into treatment, because I think you should be able to make that stuff happen. And so we're really trying to, as we work through classification, work through programming, decide where things are going to be, what makes sense. Right now, I think Michelle would say that classification as we know it today is not effective. And it probably, we have people we have lots of 3s, medium custody people at Oak Park Heights. And so, we really are, we're redesigning this whole thing. We have groups of people working on these projects. We have 6 kind of active groups of the top 50, 60 leaders in the agency, really starting to work on unpacking what we're doing today, and then looking at best practices around the country of what constitutes best around discipline procedures is another big one. And I'm going to push on discipline procedures in a massive way. And that's where some of the people get jammed up in terms of ability to access these programs. The challenge here is that we, as we look to this new model, I think ultimately, we think that there will be some changes, and as we look to do different kinds of mechanisms of addressing disciplinary issues in the DOC, I think in the end, we endeavor to have a fair system as much as that it can ever happen. And so that's one of our goals. And we have, Michelle and I have just talked about some ideas around that. We, that there will be a group that will be tasked with looking at what that looks like. And that's the way we're going to address some of this.
Yeah, I mean, thanks
Well-
for that, and please keep us in the loop, and please involve us if you can, and it's like you can, and hopefully in a year, we can be seeing changes, hopefully past implemented. So anything we can do to help speed up all the good stuff, I know you'd like to see happen, that'd be great.
Which brings me to a question, really quick question, please, Commissioner. This is Angela. With the whole treatment thing, if a person did all the programming, and I think Mr. Cooley kind of touched on this too, they've done all the programming and they're in treatment on the outside, and then they get pulled in on a technical violation, and now because of COVID, their treatment isn't accessible to them. I mean, that's not within their control. How are they supposed to continue their programming? What, that's like catch-22 and it's not within their control. What are you doing in those situations?
So
how are they supposed to navigate that situation? It's so unfair.
Well, and trust me, COVID is unfair to everybody. We didn't want this. We're doing modification of some of our treatment stuff now. The programs and many of the facilities are up and going now. While the numbers are down, we have seen those numbers down just because of distancing issues and so forth. And then they're also doing some alternative delivery of some of that packet-wise and so forth. So it's absolutely not ideal. And it's not their fault. We want to take a look at some of these people who have treatment mandates and see if there are ways that we can move them out into community-based treatment programs. But even there, it's been a bit harder to access. I know some programs are operating at full tilt. Others are not. So I don't know.
Is that something that you're willing, maybe Michelle or Curtis can look at?
We have looked at. We looked at people with the number of people that had. The vast majority of people that are being hung up on treatment directives right now have SO treatment directives. That's where the big numbers are, is the SO treatment directives. Not so much the CD ones. It's the SO treatment directives that are jamming people up.
I think Raj had a two-part question. The second part of his question regarding what are you doing to work with outside organizations to help people on work release? Did you want him to answer that question, Raj, or?
I could just say, we most of our work release centers, most of them in the metro at least, and not are halfway houses that are nonprofit, community-based nonprofits, and a lot of them have a lot of involvements with a lot of different community programs, whether it's Amicus or different. So there's a range of different partnerships. Some of that's separate from the DOC. So Kate may be working with some have the halfway houses as well as some of the community programs. How coordinated that is, it probably could be better coordinated. That's the honest answer. It's a bit all over the place.
Commissioner, there is a difference between amicus and a community agency that is not dependent on funding coming from your budget, right? Out of the $600+ million, $100 million goes to nonprofit agencies, right? And they are reliant, they are waiting for you and your organization to fund them. Those are not community agencies. They may be in our community, but they are strictly reliant on your budget and how you evaluate them. We want independent families, family members who are affected, who have been left behind, to be engaged in this change process that you say 60 people are working, right? 60 people of your higher echelon. What kind of meetings are they having? Are they getting feedback from these community members, families, right? Brothers, sisters, and other relatives in our facilities? Are they having those kinds of deep cathartic conversations with them?
There has been some. And right now what we're really starting with, Raj, is really a deep dive of what are we doing now, right? Which I can tell you does not include any of that. One of the expectations is that everything that we do, we've been having those conversations with folks on the inside and some of the recently released. The next step is really now, what about the support systems? Because as we think about this, the support systems need to be more deeply engaged from the beginning. And what does that look like, and how does that happen, and those sorts of things. So that's where we sit.
Can I make a statement? This is KB. Or actually a question. Have any of your staff talked to, there's a large group of us that have done 15, 20 years, and we've come home and we've been successful in our reintegration into society, business owners, so on and so forth. Has anyone tapped our knowledge as to what we did to get here?
Yeah,
we're
trying to get, we've had lots of conversations with a bunch of people. We have not had, certainly not everyone. We've had different conversations. Right now it's been tougher because we're doing them by phone, or we're doing them by Zoom, or we're doing them, but these are the things that we need to make sure that happen. And I think we start from the standpoint of what are the things that we're doing today? What are the structures? But I agree with you, KB. We need to be talking to people like you. We have talked to a number of folks that you would know well.
Yeah.
But
we're
it's
pretty
not the
close
entire list, and I think we need to be more broad about that. Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, I was wondering, because I wouldn't have a problem with that, because there's a lot of little small intricate things that actually help with that reintegration.
Yeah.
And that's where
I'm going to send you
some of the work release.
Will you text? I'm going to send you I'm going to put my number up. Will you text me your phone number?
Yes.
Because then I'm going to make sure that they're reaching out, and other people that you think.
Which brings me to another question, Commissioner. And I just want to be sure that your executive staff is aware of this. And KB, just so you're listening, we were posed a question a couple of weeks ago as to whether or not the DOC can work with any of us who are working with nonprofits. And I know that I personally have looked into the statute, but I know that is, in fact, you can work with us legally, but I don't know who would contest that. But I just wanted to let you know, legally, it's no problem to work with us if we are, in fact, any of us who are hired through a nonprofit. So
yeah.
It was posed to another member of IWOC, one of us who works with a nonprofit. So it was a question to one of us. And so I just wanted to state that to you.
Okay. I mean, that's good to know. I mean, I I don't work with nonprofits, but I do sit on a lot of nonprofit boards. And a lot of what we do, it would be beneficial to people coming out to help them stay home. And I think that's the objective is for them to be able to stay home and be productive members of society.
I agree.
It doesn't matter who, if you work for a nonprofit or not. One of the biggest people that helped me used to work for a nonprofit. He doesn't anymore, but he was beneficial to helping me stay home. Uh-oh.
Bethany?
Yeah, are we ready to go to the next slide? I just wanted to make sure. Okay.
The DOC upcoming budget request.
Yeah, Lisa's, I believe. Lisa, are you ready to present on this?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, Commissioner Schnell. I am. I was going to say I'm not an expert on budget, and I know there's many facets to the budget. But we were looking at some of the top DOC contracts for 2021. Just had a few questions, hoping you could answer them. The highlighted in yellow looks like the approximately 9.2 million in the budget was allocated for overflow housing to different counties. I am just wondering if I can inquire if those are HOF related overflow housing.
So not HOF, they're not HOF. Remember that anytime there is somebody who gets picked up that's on a DOC warrant,
Yep.
that's not a county expense, that's a DOC expense. And so for that 12 days or 14 days that they're in that, they're held pending that hearing, that's at state expense. So we have contracts for that time. A lot of these contracts, when you see like 2.5 million or whatever it is, those are up to contracts.
Okay.
So it's not like that's money they're going to get. It's up to contracts. And we always build contracts that are that have high numbers so that there's room there. But many of the counties are going to get money from us because of if they hold people, that's when that's where they're going to get dollars.
Okay, so it's these specific 5 counties that need holding for what would be like technical violators or reoffenders?
It'll be way more than that. But
okay,
some of these are going to be counties that are going to be that we have contracts with that are part of that may have been part of HOF before, because if we have contracts, the contracts may have a term of between 2 and 5 years. And so a lot of these numbers could be things that are these are contracts, not budget. So
gotcha.
that's a difference.
They were contracted. So if they don't use up to that 2.5 million, will that money be able to be reallocated? I know that you said logistically it's really difficult to do,
No,
but
because these are contract amounts versus what's budgeted. So if let's say we have, Centurion, that's healthcare, right? It's $35 million. Yep. That money is contracted, and that one's probably going to be whatever is the contract amount is how much they're going to get. The difference in some of these other ones, we have $3.5 million for Mayo Clinic and COVID testing. The truth of the matter is that might end up being $2.5 million, and we may have only had let's say we had 2.25 million. We have to come up with the $250,000 because this is not budgeted. This is just the contract. So you know what I mean? The budget is totally separate from the contract amounts.
Gotcha. So those are guaranteed allocated amounts.
They're not,
that are
yeah,
in
not guaranteed for them to.
contract. Okay. Yeah, so I think one of our main things is that we're interested in allocate if anywhere in the budget there was any way to look into allocating funds for housing and work release and reentry. Given that there's been a significant population reduction, we would love to start doing more reentry work and hope to circle back with Commissioner Shanklin in the coming months if we can be of assistance.
So just to give you a sense, the facilities division is going to take a budget cut of about $16 million.
Yep.
And that is based upon the population reduction.
Yeah, I
So-
saw that. It looks like we're right around 7,100 right now.
Right. And so that the difference, that $16 million cut is to the facilities division is a reflection of the population reduction.
Gotcha. Okay, well, thank you. If anybody else has any questions, those were my main points.
Anyone have any other questions?
Bethany, Commissioner, you know, the governor and you and others have expressed interests or value-centered statements about respecting human dignity and families and others. I am wondering where are line items that will say that these are the things that we are going to put in place. We're going to spend money on trying to lay the steps for abolition work.
So, I think you raised the great question, and I think so. Here's, if we're going to focus on the areas, this is one of the toughest budgets that we've had, in the sense that, when I first got my marching orders, it was, you need to cut somewhere between $60 and $100 million out of the DOC's budget. So that's where we started. What we ended up having done is we are facing just reductions in our operations division of about $4.2 million, prison reduction funding of about $16 million, and then about $9 million in reduction to community supervision. Where we have made investments, where we're making investments this time is, and I think that here's the challenge. And I know that people don't like to hear this, but some people have said, well, where are the value investments? And I think the answer is that when you look at the governor's entire state budget, that's where the value judgments were made, and oftentimes big investments in housing in general, in education, big time, higher ed, big time. So that's where a lot of the investments were made, and that's what's a reflection of the values. When we look at our budget, what we're trying to do is think about how is it that we connect the priorities within the DOC to what happens in the broader state enterprise. You can't invest. I can't remember what the number of millions, $500 million in housing, $500 million in new housing programs, and then say, but it excludes people who are system involved. And so those are the kinds of things where I think the reflection of the budget is, the values budget, is to say, look, the criminal justice system involved people are not going to be excluded from these housing investments, that the education investments are doubled down on the future, and really trying to make sure that happens, that from a higher ed standpoint, There's a desire to make sure that higher ed, and I think we're going to see very cool things happening with just the Pell access and with people in the system, and the pathways that we're working on with, with MnSCU and other partners, U of M partners across the state. I think there's some really cool options. So it's and in our budget, we have some small things that we're in that are new investments, and they are small, and that but they're there's an investment in the Healthy Start Act, which really is focusing heavily on pregnant moms. It's heart-wrenching to see the number of pregnant moms that are being sent to prison, almost every one of them for short periods of time. About half of them give birth while they're in prison. And we want both authority and we put some resources into investing in alternatives to incarceration to support keeping babies and moms together, because that's a huge priority. And we're getting some progress on that bill and getting that signed and so forth. But that's one of them. We also are looking at, it's a fairly large investment over the next biennium, about 2.4 million or so dollars, $2.2 million in the enhancing the safety and security of the jails across the state. If you watch the Care 11 series about what's happened in the jails, and we can't fail people like that anymore, and we have to make sure that we're holding the jails to account and holding ourselves to account on that front. And so there's investments on that front, because we have to do that. And really some of that stuff is really even in the bills related to that, we're pushing the envelope about things like, you can't just build a new jail. We're requiring counties to engage in a process of thinking about community-based alternatives and not building for the future, but building to strengthen communities. So we're really trying to push back at all of these different levels. There's some dollars that are being requested for information technology, information around juvenile justice data collection, because right now, as many of you know, it's all over the place, and we aren't able to get a picture of what's happening to young people in the system, and the various different ways that happens, both in the school, the prison pipeline stuff, as well as in the human services world, as well as the more traditional law enforcement and criminal justice routes. So, those are some of the areas that we've been focused on. But the DOC's budget in particular is really a budget that's grounded in cuts. It is not it's not big investments. Because the big investments have been put into other areas of priority that were believed to be ultimately to lift up people across our state, and that's largely in education, higher education, and housing.
Okay, are we ready to move on to the next slide? Thank you, Lisa. Now, Angela and I are going to do this slide. Go ahead, Angela.
Okay, retirement and an infirmary. So, we'd like to know, why can't elderly people retire in prison? And why doesn't Shakopee have an infirmary? You yourself said on January 19th that Shakopee has a higher, how do we pronounce it? Geriatric population, Commissioner?
Yeah, so if Shakopee has a high geriatric population, we want to know why they don't have an infirmary. But we wanted to play a recording testimonial by an inmate, and it's 2 parts. So the first part goes with the first bullet, and I'm going to go ahead and play it now. Hopefully, I've never done this, so just give me a second. And if anyone can't hear when this starts, please put it in the chat. Here we go.
prison, we have talked with the commissioner and other outside organizations that they do not allow anybody to retire. I'm 70 years old, and we have an inmate who's 86. And when she was 82, she had a stroke. They told her she had 6 months to get back to work, or they would take her out of her single room. She had her own room and take her out of her unit. But one of her children at the time got in touch with then Commissioner Roy. We had her name is Ardell Massey. We had a former inmate who was here between the ages of 88 and 92, and they made her walk out on ice, 30 below wind chill, freezing temperatures, lightning, to get a GED. Even one of our officers said, what's a 92-year-old going to do with a GED? Now, there used to be penalties for people if they didn't work. That has been, it says now that's been deleted, but they put them on what's called UI, meaning they take all their privileges, they have no activities, they're locked in their room except for a short break. So there's still no retirement for people 65 and older. When I've talked to many women who served in other prisons where nobody's required to work, but here there's nobody cannot stop working. We have people who are permanently in wheelchairs who are forced to work.
All right, I'm going to play the second part. Yeah, I love those jail calls that are like a minute and a half long. Okay, here we go.
All right, the other thing is, I mentioned the lack of an infirmary at this prison. Like Faribault has one that's even considered the whole wing is set up, like they have a 24-hour nursing. I witnessed, as I mentioned, 2 people who had come back several years back, literally bent over in pain. One had gallbladder surgery and the other one had another one. And they're just put back in their room. They could stop breathing. They could have complications. They could have a seizure. There's no one there to monitor them. Shakopee Prison has put people in segregation. We had a couple inmates who have passed away over the years, and they were dying, and they put them in seg instead of an infirmary. One, her name was Jessie Brown, died of pneumonia. She was in segregation, and 2 others, Carlene Bushkoff and Kim Cunningham, who are dying. They put them in seg. Even now with the quarantine, people are put in seg in these cold rooms with the steel, the toilets. They're locked in. They're not getting any outside time. It's almost like a punishment. And all that, the response from the DOC is, well, it's not cost effective. They don't think we have enough people. Well, of course, we had as much as over 650, and it's much needed.
Okay. Okay, so that made me cry yesterday when I heard that. I was literally crying. I just can't imagine like somebody in those situations. So what's your knowledge about this, Commissioner Schnell?
So here's what I do know is that, you know, I don't know. I mean, generally speaking, people, there's a medical review. There's no forced, you know, but it's not like the traditional retirement that, you know, it's 65 or 67 or whatever it is. That's what it is. It's oftentimes done in consultation with them, the medical, and there's a medical review that is done with them. And we have some of the folks that want to be able to work. They want to have some higher levels of activity. We do. Shakopee does have does have 24-hour nursing. True, it does not have a more traditional infirmary. And I think right now we've moved a group of the women together. I think it's in Methuen. I can't remember the names, all the names of the facilities, or the different units, but where a lot of the older geriatric population is. I don't know that if I said they have a higher geriatric population than others, we are seeing a growing geriatric population in general in the DOC, and this is the case really across the country, both in prisons as well as in the community. We're an aging population and generally more health problems. So what this looks like, and right now our population at Shakopee is very low. It makes it much easier to manage some of this than it does when we were at 650. I think we're in the 300s now, somewhere in the mid to upper threes. And so it's a very different situation. Nobody's living in wing lounges and stuff like that. So it's very different. We are looking and we are having some conversations with DHS, because this is an issue as well. If you talk to the folks at the Department of Human Services that are in direct care and treatment facilities, they have some of the very same problems. How we manage the people that are oftentimes going to be in a commitment status, whether it's a commitment to the Department of Corrections or a commitment to the Department of Human Services, that probably are going to end up for the remainder of their life there. And how do we address that? DHS does have a small facility at St. Peter, which is a kind of a forensic nursing home. And it really is intended for people who have high needs that are really in commitment. It's a very small number of beds. We have moved some people there over the course of time, but getting people in is virtually impossible because those beds are oftentimes held for long periods of time. And I think it's maybe 35 or 36 beds.
Why are elderly people even deemed a threat in their 80s and 90s?
The problem is we oftentimes there's not a place for them to go. Not that there couldn't be a release, but there isn't a place for them to go.
Why?
Because there's not a place for them to go.
Like, why can't they go into like nursing homes or something? In
some instances, and in many instances, nursing homes will not take some of these long-term folks that are in DHS or in DOC.
Or why haven't you created a wing like they created the treatment wing? Or I mean, in my 5 years in Shakopee, I saw them revamp that place a number of times, including when they revamped it for COVID. So why haven't they done that to include an infirmary?
Because we didn't have space to do it before, and now we do.
So are they going to?
We have to have the money to be able to do it too. And so that, there's a number of projects that are being looked at. Ultimately, it will be a great thing if we can keep the population in the 350 range at Shakopee. It would be ideal, because if we could do that, the ability to maintain a unit like that would be much easier. But when you start getting into the 600s, you're going to have people in the wing lounges again, and 4-person rooms, and so we have to be able to do that. And so it's really important that we keep the pressure on so that we aren't filling all these beds.
All right. I do have a letter from an inmate I would like to read parts of. Again, she is asking, she's concerned about the treatment of the elderly population in Shakopee. And she says, how is there no retirement age? There isn't even a stipend set aside, even a small amount of $20 a month. So they would be able to afford even minor amounts of hygiene per month. How about having them walk to work, no matter the conditions, below zero, very icy, they still have to go. If not put in restriction, if they don't go, they'll be put in restriction, UI, for not working. I've written ombudsman with the response that they would not investigate this matter. What are they for? In other words, what are the ombudsman for? The guards laugh and tell us straight up that nothing will really ever happen if we use the grievance process. They laugh and challenge us to to the grievance process, write a grievance process against them, knowing it falls on deaf ears. Could you even imagine the helplessness and frustration that causes? Think about how many wrongs are just swept aside on the inmate, and nobody does anything because our grievance process is a joke, and apparently our new appointed ombudsman is also. I've been here for 3 years. I get out April 12th. I've made a promise to some of the elderly population to try to advocate for them when I get out. So any advice or a direction to go with it is very welcome. I myself am 50 and I can say ageism in prison is alive and kicking. It took me 15 months to get them to look at my neck, which only happened with a med student who got to listen to me, took a look right away. She knew it was cancer, but that's a whole different story. If you could please write back with any info before April 12th, I'd appreciate it. Thank you, Catherine Nelson. Yeah, so she says something very similar to what the recording was. So
now I feel really old. If 50 is old, is elderly, then
I know, right? I'm 51, so I get it. But what do you think about that? It just seems
so
like the guards are laughing at them, really?
Well,
like,
look, I'm not defending anybody. I'm not defending that. It's ridiculous. It's hard for me to. It infuriates me when I hear it. I can chase that stuff. It's very difficult. We think that we're going to have some ways to have better levels of accountability when we move our kites to the tablets, that's really where that comes from. I would say that we have right now there are 6 women at Shakopee over age 65, and the oldest one is 87 years old. Well,
she can come live with me.
All right.
If you let her out.
We'll work on that.
I mean, if we find people to take these people in, this should, they're enough is enough already, right? I mean that from the bottom of my heart. I'm not being surly. So we need to do something. Like, we need to check in with you next week or next week, the next time we meet, and check on the status of that, please. Does anyone else have anything to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, we have to have a statutory basis to release, and there's some things that we could look at,
I mean, at one point there was the caretaker, like the PCA job. I thought that was going to be helpful, and then it disappeared. I knew the infirmary wasn't going to just like happen overnight. But I thought they were at least going to like get some care, and then that disappeared. So that's my comment.
Okay.
Going to the next slide, Bethany. Bethany?
Oh, I'm sitting here talking and I'm on mute. Dang it. I'm sorry. Okay, so I heard you addressing a lot of the questions regarding infirmary and stuff, but did you, maybe I just didn't hear you. Did you address the fact that inmates cannot retire?
Yeah, I mean, there is not a quote unquote retirement policy. Not mandated. It's not something that I'm not even aware of right now. People who have asked to. So we can certainly look at it. We can look at it. There is not a retirement policy.
So once you look at it, how will we know what the result is? Will you email one of us?
I mean, we can talk about it next month. I don't even know what that would look like, but we can. We'll have Michelle can have folks talk about that and figure out what some of the options are, what's happening around the country, and go from there.
Yeah, maybe it could
Yeah,
look like just letting them out and stay with people like us
But
or
so
whatever.
but I can't do that, right? Because these are people are they're under commitment and a sentence, and so the judge can do that. We can release it or conditional medical release them.
Yeah, that'd be great.
But they have to meet the criterion. And so, there's a bill being done right now by John Choi, got dropped. I think it went in today, where county attorneys, and I know this would be interesting to see what your reaction is. County attorneys will be able to essentially parole people. In other words, what they could do is look at somebody who's been sentenced, and they could petition the court for a resentencing and a subsequent release. And the scenario that you described would be the perfect scenario for something like that. Because right now I have, unless they meet the relatively tight conditional medical release criterion, I have no authority to release anybody.
Yeah, I understand.
Age or anything like that. So it would be, the courts would have to grant the release on something like that.
Do you have the name of that bill? Is it like HR something?
I don't know the number. I can try and get it and send it over to you, the email address here, and go from there. And then you guys can look at it, but I don't know the number.
So
Okay.
would it be safe to say that moving forward, we will say that we will leave it at possible CMR and
I can't say that. I can't say that because I don't think that age is not in itself as a criteria for conditional medical release.
Well, you said you're releasing people more on end of life stage. I would say 80s.
End of life is what I'm talking about. There is it's hospice.
Okay. Well, I
So
like
then
your. Is it John Shoyt? SHOYT?
No, it's
No,
choice.
CHOI.
Okay. Thank you. What were you going to say, Angela?
Then let's say we will look at some of the, as the commissioner stated, some of the drafts of policy of what did you say, sir, other states were doing?
Well, look, we can look at what a retirement model would look like and what that would look like. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. We're going to go to the next slide now, which is, I believe Sarah is going to take this one because she's been directly affected by this. And the floor is yours, Sarah. Let me make sure. Oh, you're muted, hon.
That probably helps.
That's
Thank you.
better.
Yeah. Hi, Commissioner Schnell. How are you this evening?
All right.
I'm sure that you probably feel like we're beating a dead horse, but just wanted to get a quick update on where we stand with the victim visitation policy. I check it daily, so I know it's not been publicly updated. So
No, it has not yet. I think what some of this stuff is with the COVID stuff being up and down, with visiting being open and closed so quickly when you hit 2 cases. That's been a bit of an issue, but that the policy language is changed. Is in process to change. It will be. Right now, we are undergoing a significant discussions in terms of the policy approval process, and this is where some of these we have a bunch of policies that have been drafted and are in the final stages of approval. But what happens is we in the past, what might happen is that a few people would review those policies. Like I'm not even a part of the sign off of those policies. It's usually the 2 deputies, so Michelle and Curtis, and then the assistant commissioner. And so, but as we got into this, we started to find that there may have been things where somebody may have looked at that policy and made an approval and not really thought about some other factor that would be implicated by that. So we are, I think there's a conversation happening, I think it's next Monday, among that group to talk about what that sign-off process is going to be. Because right now there's a whole bunch of policies in the final sign-off review pipeline. And I believe this is one of them. So it's, you know, a lot of those things are drafted. It's just, we need to make sure that we are not approving policies that all of a sudden we find a month later have not been looked at by another side of the DOC or somebody else and in the system, and then we have to change it again. So we're trying to come up with a cleaner way of doing that. So that's what they're meeting about next week.
So Commissioner, I can just simply say if there are individuals who have specific visiting questions or concerns or want their case reviewed, Brittany and I are doing those on individual bases and have been working through that process and have already approved a number of people. So you can send people my way.
Okay, because I mean, I do have a few people who have just been reaching out to me specifically going, you know, I hear that this is supposed to be happening, what's going on? And I keep trying to just reassure them that it is supposedly happening.
There's a number of people that have been reaching out to victim services and talked to Brittany and
okay.
And so I think that really is the best avenue. If people reach out to you, send them to myself or to Brittany and we will review those.
Okay, and then also I just kind of wanted to bring to your attention as well that within kind of our group, meaning those of us who have loved ones incarcerated, we become a family and it becomes a very small group of people that you begin to interact with. And a lady by the name of Lori Lafrano, I think she's a child support liaison, has reached out to someone within our kind of small group and started to ask for feedback on recommendations on how victims would like to see policy changes as it relates to visitation. So I think that it's also caused a lot of confusion because when we originally submitted these recommendations, we also kind of reached out to the same group to pull in a lot of that same voice and kind of combined that with that Violence-Free Minnesota voice that they collected. So I think that now they're going like, well, who is this person and why is she asking these questions? So I didn't know like where the disconnect is or anything like that. So I wanted to make sure that we were connecting those dots between this child support liaison with the DOC and whatever's going on with this policy change.
Child support liaison, that's probably a shared position with DHS and us. So it's not, so they may do some stuff with us, but it's really a Department of Human Services position. That's why there's a disconnect.
Okay.
That would be my guess. And we can verify that, but I think that that's probably the case.
Okay. Yeah. Because I was like, that doesn't sound right. But I said I would ask, knowing that we had this call coming up. So
Yep. I believe that's DHS.
Okay. Do we know if the intent at this point is that victims will be required to reapply? And if so, is there any plans to kind of expedite those applications specifically?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things that are in process. We're reconstituting our victim services unit at the DOC. And there's a hiring going on, I believe right now it's posted, or if it's not, it will be very soon. A victim services supervisor, and then there's going to be regional navigators that are going to be put in place. These were funded positions and have been long time funded. We're just that unit's being reconstituted. And so these folks are going to be really working. The regional navigators are going to be the folks that are going to be much more closely connected with the programs like Violence Free and others. And there's a north and a south and a central, so that there's people that people will be able to access and that kind of stuff and help streamline some of the stuff as we go forward. So that's in process, that hiring, and we're coordinating on that with MinCasa, Violence Free Minnesota, and Minnesota Alliance on Crime. So those programs are involved in that. And then, so exactly what that looks like, if we'll do a whole new process, or you know, if there were people who were denied or whatever, then we want to be able to, yeah, go back and do that, because sometimes things change. We have a number of people,
Sure.
you know, they are not. So, and we can get some information out when that policy gets done, and if people want to reapply and look at that, that can be done.
Thank you. And like I said, I know that we bring this up every single time. I just want to make sure that we continue to stay on top of it. So
Yep.
appreciate
And
it.
that, and the, you know, the video visiting stuff, it's just, you know, there's a ton of change here, and some of it we don't know because of the new tablets, and so it's, you know, that's coming slower than we want, but it's coming, and those things could be game changers. It won't be immediate, but over time we're going to really look at expanding the use of those tablets for some of these things.
Well, again, we just appreciate you taking the seriousness of the connection of family. So it's important. We appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Bethany. That's all I had.
Okay, great, thanks. So I am going to let Matthias go next, and then I'll do my slide after him. So Matthias is up next, and he is talking about elected inmate representatives.
Yeah, hello, hi, Commissioner. Thank you for taking the time. I know that this is a much larger conversation, and we don't have a lot of time now. So I'm also speaking on behalf of two friends inside who've been pushing for a while for a different form of representation. And I mean, there is a moral argument to make to give people some agency within an overall situation of disempowerment, but also I think a very pragmatic argument, and it is beneficial in that context. I mean, I'm referring, for example, to a German study. I know it's a German study, but it's done this in facilities in Germany where inmate representation has been instituted. It's in German. I'm happy to translate the conclusions, but
Yeah,
I have some of them. Yeah,
that's the name Schnell. I know a little bit of German.
Yeah, so
very little.
Yeah. And some of their conclusion was that it's it's a training in responsibility and accountability for those that are truly elected. Representatives can offer help and advice to new people in prison. They function as mentors. Experience of actually having some agency lowers the overall frustration level and makes the overall atmosphere less aggressive. And people incarcerated and staff can learn actually from each other how to do things better. So a collaborative approach is more likely to solve problems than coercion, which breeds resistance. It also, if it is rightly done, can break up detrimental group or gang dynamics. And the skill set that people actually acquire as representatives increases chances of successful reintegration. So this is what the study found. And I know it's very difficult to introduce this all of a sudden overall, but maybe it's worth looking into the possibility of having a pilot where people are kind of really represented. And I mean, ways that there is a fair representation and that diversity is taken into consideration can be worked out. There are very different models. But I mean, I think it would be really worth, for all these pragmatic reasons, not least to try something like a pilot. And I think we would be happy to also provide ideas how this could be done. And yeah, so this is something I wanted to bring up to you.
I think it's interesting that, just the difference between right now we have reps and but I think this whole notion is kind of interesting. It's sometimes in some of our facilities can be a little bit more transient. In other words, people are moving, but some of the places where we have longer term, I don't know, it would be something we're going to talk. I'm going to talk to Michelle about this because I was just thinking about this and how this correlates with some of the European stuff. We're working with the folks, a lot of the Norwegian stuff, and I think it's a really interesting. The whole thing is a really self-agency, and how do you replicate kind of some of the systems in the community, and create kind of more these positive cultures and that kind of stuff. I think it's something I really am interested in having them take a look at and talking about. I think it would be intriguing, and it would be really interesting if that study was translated in English. But it would just to see because I do think I think it's an intriguing idea.
Yeah, and I'm happy to translate some of the chapters. So
well, I'll ask a little bit about it, and even we might be able to just have it electronically translated. But I'm interested. We'll talk about it because there's things about the model that I think would be really interesting as we go forward.
Thank you.
And Matthias was my professor in undergrad for understanding Kant, and I can attest to his supreme and superb abilities.
There you go. So
understanding this, if he can understand Kant.
I think it would be really intriguing to kind of think about, like, well, how would we, are there ways we could test it, right? So if we did this, that we test it. What would that look like? So you're an academic, you can think about what that looks like, but I think it's intriguing, really intriguing. So if there are elements of the program that they did, like you talked about training and some of that, well, that would be interesting to know, and then how they ran it. I mean, would be some of the details of how that happened, what that looked like, would be really fascinating, and because we would need to figure out how to do it if we were to even pilot it.
Yeah, I'm happy to look deeper also to maybe explore some.
So you want to put together some concepts that we can look at and then talk about? I'd love to look at it. Be great.
Okay, so we're going to go back to my slide, which is vaccines. So I was watching your meeting with Peace of Hope at the Shiloh Temple on January 19th, the Facebook recording, Commissioner Schnell. And during that recording, you had mentioned the beginning of the vaccinations in the facilities and the high level of emotion expressed when the first incarcerated person was vaccinated. And that was really touching. Do you know how many people and what population has been vaccinated so far inside the facilities?
There's been, I think, Michelle may know the number better, but I think there's like almost just shy of 200 people.
It's actually 355.
In
clients.
Yeah,
355 incarcerated people have been vaccinated. 239 received their first dose and 116 received their second dose. And that's as of the 9th. And we continue to have, and then we have about just over 500 staff.
And do you know which
the staff?
Those are divided between every facility. So there has been people vaccinated at every facility.
Oh, really? Because I mean, I've heard that Shakopee hasn't had any yet.
That's not true.
No, that's not true.
The guards have, or the inmates?
No,
the inmates have both.
Both.
We have vaccinated somebody, both staff and incarcerated people.
In every facility.
At I believe every facility, but yes, it would not be true that there's a zero.
Even Togo. So health services staff, behavioral health, all those people that were in the 1A kind of classification, they got first round. And then, some of the, dentists and some of those other folks as well. Then all of those folks that were in those specialty units, and then we've identified a group of people that were in that over 65 and with the some of the high risk, high need stuff. And
actually, I will go back on what I said. Yes, at Shakopee, and there are 2 facilities that are at 0, which means they don't have a population of over 65.
Okay, and then Do you have any idea when everyone's going to be offered vaccination or have the opportunity?
Not yet.
That's the question of the day, every day.
Yeah,
When we meet with the department.
I met with the governor today and we talked about it. And, you know, we're pushing to get this done. It's, so as soon as trust me, we have a plan. We are ready to go. We're hoping to be able to get about 3,500 vaccines a week for about 3 weeks on end, and we'll go out and we'll get everybody done. Everybody, staff and folks in the population, get everybody done.
And people who are working, they're gonna be given time to get those too, right? Without being.
What do you mean?
Like,
We're gonna get them lined up and just get the shots in people's arms.
and then going forward, once everyone's been vaccinated, people coming in will be given the opportunity to be vaccinated as well.
Correct. Once we get the population vaccinated and staff vaccinated, then we want to be able to.
So the governor knows the timeline more than you would, right?
It's not my choice. I've been advocating, trust me, because I'm getting pressure from both loved ones, population, and staff, and everyone. So I want this as soon as we can get it done.
All right.
It's actually a vaccine committee that's a statewide vaccine committee that makes its recommendations to the state.
Do you know who the contact person is at that committee?
I do not.
No, and
Sorry.
I will tell you that you can write stuff to the Department of Health, and they will submit it to that committee. And right now, everybody's getting it. There is a lawsuit filed as well, just to try and get the court action to order vaccination of the population.
Okay, that's good. Okay, yeah, because they're definitely one of the most vulnerable populations for sure. Did anyone have any questions or comments on vaccines?
I did want to ask about masks in all the prisons. I know that the women in Shakopee suggested a GoFundMe page even to get masks in their prison, but they don't have them, and then people that are testing positive are getting put in their units. So if you could speak to that.
Yep, I can actually tell you that there are masks available in every facility if individuals need or want them. Most facilities have issued anywhere from 4 to 7 masks to the entire population. Obviously, they get worn a lot, and so those masks continue to be reissued if needed. They are required to wear them, and they just finished making gator style masks that I'm hoping are going to be available soon. They had those in prototype, and so those should be available soon. And I think we'll get better wear with those than the ones that, with the elastic behind your ear. So yeah, if they need a mask, they can just ask for one.
Have they, can I ask one more question? So have you dedicated a line in the garment shop to masks?
We have 2 facilities that have been making masks for the last year. Yep. Moose Lake and Shakopee both have been producing hundreds of thousands of masks, not only for our department, but for other state agencies and private entities, are like group homes, jails, masks, shields, gowns, all of that. Yep.
Yeah. And I would just end with, I think one expectation is like, if the inmates are making them, the inmates should be protected, like with priority.
Yep, and they, like I said, if they need one, they just need to ask.
But is it like a disposable one, or because I know there was one inmate who has COPD and asthma, and she had issues with the masks that were being. Remember, she had issues with the masks that were being given to her, and she kind of made her own and then got written up. And I know,
Yep,
Michelle,
and
you took care of that.
Yep, we dealt with that one. And there was and there is still a style of mask that's out there that some people have because they like it. that was used with a super thick piece of material, which in reality is exactly what needs to be. But the masks that have been produced over the course of the last 11 months, basically, have come in all various shapes and forms. And we also have issued surgical style disposable masks to the entire population as well, which obviously do not last for long periods of time, but we have issued those out as well. But the masks, yeah, they kind of come and go with the various materials. We've been trying lots of different things. I actually really haven't heard a lot of complaints about the masks for some time. So I think we've honed in on a pretty good product right now. It took a while to get there.
Okay.
I have a quick question. On the second dose of the vaccine, I am wondering if there's been any consideration to the side effects of the second dosage, where I've heard or people have heard that there's a lot of side effects to that dosage. I'm wondering if there's been any consideration to people on the inside, if they get the vaccination, if they would be allowed time off work without punishment or without using their days.
We're not gonna.
Or if it could be considered.
We don't want to
all
harm
of those
people.
things are being taken into consideration. We understand and recognize, not only for the population, but for staff as well, that the vaccines are going to come with some possible degree of side effects. And with almost 1,000 people combined with staff and the population already vaccinated, we've been able to work through a number of those concerns. So yes, when we schedule the clinics and the expectations, staff are aware of what those side effects potentially could be.
Question. Are there, have you encountered people who do not want the vaccine for possible religious or medical reasons?
For actually any reason, and the vaccines are not required by either the population or staff. And yes, there have been people that have refused the vaccine.
Okay, Commissioner Schnell, you mentioned something about the tablets. You said, hopefully, I think last year they were supposed to be available, and then I remember a few months ago you said February. Are they for sure going to be coming in February this month now?
No.
Do you want me to talk on that?
Well, I would just say this. It's gonna. Right now, we're looking at probably April. The COVID delays in terms of cabling and a bunch of other things have resulted in some delays. And so we're working to finalize that, and right now it's looking like April is when that would likely happen.
Okay. All right. So now we are at our last slide, which is just basically our closing slide. We want to thank you all for your time. I think we made some good progress. We look forward to continuing our partnership with you and progressing more. I wanted to know if anyone in the DOC wanted to give any other updates or address anything else.
No, I just would say, that when this bill comes out, this is one that we need people to show up for. We need to create a little bit of pressure. We are, and I'm talking about even things like certainly how do we make sure that people in the community understand from whatever vantage point they want to look at this, that this type of program makes good sense for them and for the good of the community, for the good of the folks that we serve. Because I think, the more people we can get behind this to say, look, this is smart policy, the more likely that we put pressure on the GOP side, on the Senate, to give us a hearing. And that's our biggest concern. And we are working every angle that we have and can to try and make sure we try to get a hearing on that side. And we've talked to Senator Limmer, and he's deliberate and wants to make sure, and so he's he's not always super open to looking at quick implementation. He likes to talk about things for a while, and yet this is one of those things that we think if we could get past, it should have appeal to both sides, the people on both sides of the aisle, both politically, even both sides of the political kind of ideology framework. It's good for everyone. And so we really need help doing this. We're doing a whiteboard presentation that you've seen those things where they have these little stick figures and they talk about, kind of show the model. We're putting one of those together. We're going to really do a kind of a lot of social media, make sure people are aware of what this is and what the benefits are for this and why it's so important. And I think the more people we can get to pass it along and to mobilize the message about how and why this is important for people, the better. And so.
So how do we show up? Like, is there like a lobby day?
Yeah.
I mean,
So there will be when we get a hearing, and we think that will probably be late February or very early March. We are going to want to have people really reaching out to legislators, emails, and we can put stuff out like this. And you guys have a lot of that already, but I just think it's really important if we can. I would love to have people on your committee testify to this stuff, because that's the stuff that matters. These stories matter, and we've talked to some incarcerated folks already who formerly incarcerated, who said that they will testify, and who I think will be able to give some real voice to what they think could be beneficial about this. But it's really everyone, and the more people we get to talk about this, the better. So I just as I look at the time, all I know is that I'm guaranteed. Again, it could change tomorrow because the governor could change me, or the Senate could not confirm me. But I have 2 years, and I want to make as much change and difference as we can in that time. Despite the fact that I know it's hard. You all get frustrated, and I get frustrated. We all get frustrated. But I think we want to try to do what we can to affect the biggest amount of change possible in the remaining 2 years that we have left. And so,
yeah, I hear you. Do you have the name of that bill, please?
What we're calling this is the Minnesota Rehabilitation and Reinvestment Act. We don't have a number yet. As soon as we get a House file number, we can let you know, but we don't have a House file or Senate file number yet.
And who's on this? Who's in charge? Which committee is this, and who's in charge again?
It's going to be. It will go to. I think the author on the House will be Chair Mariani, Carlos Mariani. Representative Mariani will be the author of this one.
Okay.
And then with many others. We think that a lot of the Posse Caucus, the People of Color and Indigenous Caucus, will be a lot of the folks who are going to sign on to this bill and really help push this bill. So
do you know if Isaiah is involved at all?
Isaiah's aware, yes.
Okay, good. I'm with the Muslim Coalition of Isaiah, so I'm going to ask them if they have anyone, if they're trying to find anyone to testify, any inmates or anything.
Yeah, they've been, they're pretty good about showing up. There was also, I haven't seen it yet. I haven't looked at it, but I would just encourage you. There was a bill, I was told today, that got dropped. That got dropped trying to put limitations on the on probation stuff. Remember, we did the probation caps at the Sentencing Guidelines Commission. There was a bill dropped today that was going to try and unwind some of that. If you, I don't have any of the info on it, but yeah, but. Could
you maybe find it and email it to us, or, I mean, we want to support these.
I got it. I might have it here.
Hey, does anybody have the language for the,
this one is Senate File 8.
On the reinvestment and
we don't have it. I have the we're waiting on it from the reviser. We'll get it as soon as we get it from the reviser's office.
Okay. Because I can take it back to the George Floyd Coalition.
Yeah, that'd be
Probably
great.
get them lined up for it too.
Yeah, that'd be great. Senate File 870 is the one that I just learned about this evening.
Okay, great. One other thing I wanted to ask Michelle. Michelle, when you speak to people at Rush City regarding the Muslim inmates there wearing the kufiya and being able to do all of the positions in their prayer, right? The prostration and everything. How will we know what the outcome is of that is? Do you have our email? Because I would like to be updated on that as soon as I can, as soon as we can.
Is this Bethany?
Yep, this is Bethany. I'm sorry, I could put my camera back on. I forgot.
Well, no, that's okay. My screen, I can't always tell who's talking. Depends on.
Hi, it's me.
Okay. Yeah, but anyways, I think I have your email.
I'll put it in the chat.
Okay, that'd be great.
And David's been working on this really diligently too. I want to give a huge
Okay, yeah,
shout
and
out to David.
I have David's email address.
Yeah, if you want to just email David, he'll let me know.
Okay.
Another point another point I just wanted to ask the commissioner. I know that there's been some discussion in regards to a data request that IWOC put in November. And I know that there's been a lot of discussion back and forth about, the size, the labor that's been put into it. Last night, there was an email that was sent out citing that they were seeking like $50 from IWOC for inspection. And I just wanted to say that is not typical, and that according to state statute, that if the only way an agency has to provide data is to put it in a format such as the one the DOC is putting it in, then that's a cost that the agency should be absorbing.
All right, I'll have the legal counsel look at that tomorrow morning. I'll talk to them.
And then just send everything to David because he can.
All right.
I hope you're okay with that, David. I don't know if he's still on or not, but I think it's easier for you all to have one go-to person, and then everyone can check in with David. Unless you want to put your email in the chat, Noah.
I've got Noah's info.
Oh, cool.
You have no many.
Yeah.
Everybody's got my email.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome.
Who doesn't have his email?
I don't know. I just chat with him on Facebook. Okay, so what was I gonna say? Okay. So one thing I wanted to say too, we didn't address one more thing real quick on the Muslim issues. Is what's been happening is like inmates will make a grievance like the guards aren't letting me wear my kafia, and then someone will reach out to a representative from the Muslim community and say, is this required? And then based on that answer, the DOC will get back to the inmate, but it's causing an animosity as if there's no one advocating for them on the outside, and they can't communicate with the volunteers, even though the volunteers aren't really doing anything right now, like the imams and other representatives from the Muslim community, like Wafiq Fanoon, that goes into the prisons because of COVID. But I just want to make sure that you are asking, like, we're going to try to put together like a one-stop go-to coalition for the Muslim community, so you can ask questions and get different, schools of thoughts and scholarly insight from one area. But we're just concerned about animosity being caused because of that. Am I making sense?
Yeah, I think so. Just in terms of kind of the access to kind of a resource.
Well, like the DOC will tell the inmate, well, we talked to so-and-so from this masjid or whatever, right? And they said that's not required, so we're not going to let you do it. And that's just causing a lot of
right, because it may not represent the whole of,
right.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah,
just want to make sure that's not happening.
Yeah, and yeah, we can, Michelle can ask when she talks to the folks up at Rush tomorrow, if how they're evaluating that.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Does anyone have any other questions? If there's no other questions or comments, then I think we went under 3 hours this time. Last time it was 3 hours or a little over, so that's good. I think everyone did a great job, and I look forward to hearing from you on all of those, hearing back from the DOC on all of those issues. I appreciate you being concerned about them and taking them seriously and looking into them. I appreciate you doing that, Michelle. There's one thing in the chat. I just want to make sure it's not something that, okay. Oh, Matthias just said thank you. Yeah, thank you, everyone. And we'll get back to you on a date for our next meeting. Does that sound good?
All right, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Take care. Be well.